What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back with a spoiler-free review for Luca Guadagnino's new movie Challenger, starring Zendaya. I even put on my tennis gear for the review, but it goes into wide release this weekend, and she was nice enough to pop in for a visit at our screening. And I'm kicking myself because I was kind of fumbling with my phone and trying to get the shot in focus, but in any event, I was caught off guard by her sudden arrival.
Wow, I cannot, this is so cool. We just wanted to stop by and say hello. This is my first time opening a movie as a lead in this way, so this is like really, so this is very exciting and extremely nerve-wracking.
But, as she said so herself, this is her first big stab at opening a movie where she is a star, where the movie's not part of a major franchise, and I must admit, I liked it. And at times, I really liked it. And I think it's guaranteed to make my top 10 for the year, but I must warn some folks, this is not your typical Hollywood sports movie. It's not an obvious crowd pleaser at all. It is narratively complex. You have to sit up and pay attention. There's so many little details that pay huge dividends later on, but if you blink, you will miss them. And the three central characters, while talented and obviously attractive, at times they can be vicious, or if you want to be polite, you could say driven or ambitious. But the aggressive, adversarial, and sexually charged relationship between these three characters, it might be more than a lot of people have bargained for. And the movie also stubbornly refuses to deliver any of the formulaic dramatic payoffs offered by most sports movies. And because this movie is always threatening to kind of bubble over or spill over with sexual tension and or innuendo, I suspect there are going to be some old school tennis fans out there who show up expecting just a nice night at the movies with a movie about tennis, but they might find it a little shocking. That said, my crowd ate it up. There was a big round of applause at the end, and I noticed a lot of young ladies in the crowd, so at least Zendaya's fans appear to have gotten the memo. So if you're unfamiliar with the premise, it's pretty straightforward on paper, but it's told in this incredibly intricate style. But you basically have two old friends who are getting close to the end of their tennis careers, facing off in this epic grudge match. But due to their shared history with the character played by Zendaya, all these revelations start coming to light. And then in a series of flashbacks covering the last 13 years, we see their early idealistic phase where great tennis and sometimes great sex are all they seem to care about. But then a series of injuries and bad decisions and kind of uneven luck have placed them all in very different roles with very different career trajectories than they might have anticipated early on. But the story is really messy, it's incredibly combative, at times it's very alluring, and every once in a while, Luca Guadagnino remembers this is a tennis movie and gives us some great action scenes, oftentimes filming the matches in delightfully surprising ways, like he creates the illusion of putting the camera inside a tennis ball or smashing the tennis ball right into the face of the audience. Like, definitely hunt down this movie in IMAX if you have an IMAX screen nearby. And I won't lie and claim that I'm the world's biggest tennis fan. However, I have been to the Open a few times with my dad, usually because I want to watch my dad, who's obsessed. My dad is the same way about tennis the way I am about movies. But I've been to the Open a few times, and when you're there, it's just a completely different experience. I've never liked the way the tennis is shown on TV. I know that's the way you have to kind of portray it, but it just feels dramatically unexciting. So at a minimum, Luca Guadagnino is trying to inject like some interesting camera angles and some different techniques to dramatize the action. Although, if you are accustomed to watching a lot of tennis on TV, you might be like, why are you fucking with the camera so much? Just show us the match. So I think this movie is going to be very divisive amongst movie fans, and I think this movie is going to be very divisive amongst tennis fans. For my part, I play the game very poorly, but I'm good enough where I can get together and like play doubles with the family, like Thanksgiving and Christmas and that sort of thing, without completely humiliating myself. But yeah, if you ask me to serve the ball, I'm like, already everybody's about to laugh at my weak and pathetic serve. But I will wait until my dad has seen it this coming weekend to address all the technical inaccuracies in the film. I'm sure they are overflowing out of this movie, but I just don't have enough of a critical eye when it comes to the sport of tennis to know like what this movie got right, what this movie got wrong, at least in terms of like challenger matches versus like being a ranked player versus the US Open and that sort of thing. So I will leave all those discussions to people who are more invested in the sport of tennis. But I do think there's a very good chance that this movie might find an audience with people who aren't necessarily fans of like traditional sports movies, but like really visceral, intense, stylish dramas. Because I mean, you got a friggin' score in here by, was it Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross? Like, at times you're like, whoa, this movie feels very European, and it is very European. It's got a very stylish European, Italian director sitting in the director's seat, so don't go in expecting like your typical kind of high school's like a football flick or anything like that. This movie's going for a very different vibe, a very different tone. ultimately, what ended up selling me on this movie were two very memorable scenes, and I'm going to try to discuss them without giving away any spoilers, like tap dancing across a few laser beams. But as you've seen in the trailer, there's a scene early on in their career where all three of them are hanging out in a hotel room, they're eating pizza, having a few beers, and inevitably, because they're young and attractive and athletic and that sort of thing, they get horny and they decide to get it on. The scene in question is probably not necessarily what you're expecting, or it's not as advertised. But what's great is just the atmosphere of authenticity prior to the menage a trois. Because anybody who's ever been in a situation where like, oh my God, like, can I kiss her? Will I kiss her? Will she kiss me? Blah, blah, blah. Like all those questions where people are kind of nervous to make the first move, but they're excited and they're horny and that sort of thing. Like that scene is captured so well with so much authenticity. And I feel like it'll make everybody feel like, 17 or 18 all over again. That scene was handled beautifully. And I think it's probably the best acting by Zendaya throughout the entire movie. And as far as her two co-stars are concerned, the characters played by Josh O'Connor and Mike Feist, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his last name, but let's just say it was probably the easiest acting in their lives to say, look, pretend to be excited about the possibility of hooking up with Zendaya. And they're like, all right, yeah, sounds good. Like, let's get the cameras rolling. But I like both actors quite a bit. And there were a few scenes where you could tell they definitely brought in some stuntmen for like some pretty hardcore, high-level tennis. But they both seem to know their way around the court. They both can play convincingly. That's always the question. Like, do you want a great actor who can play a little bit of tennis? Or do you want somebody who's great at tennis, but who can't really act all that well? I think this movie leaned to or deferred to getting three actors who have great chemistry, who work well together, who have a great energy on screen together. But when it comes to like their different levels of skill or talent, once again, I will defer to the judgment of people who are much more invested in the sport of tennis. But getting back to the two ingredients that sold me on this movie, there's another ingredient, and I'm going to be very vague, but toward the end of the movie, there's a payoff where this little trail of breadcrumbs has been teased with little details and little tells and ticks by the characters where it all dovetails and comes together so beautifully. You're like, oh, I get it now. Like, I thought those random scenes were just there for for flavor or for texture or whatever the case might be. But there's been a method to the madness of the writer the entire time. And you start to see this incredibly elaborate, sophisticated structure from a storytelling standpoint. And as somebody who's oftentimes frustrated by lackluster talents in the world of screenwriting, it was just a delight to discover a new screenwriter to be excited about. But I was so impressed by the screenplay I looked for the writer, where much to my surprise I learned this was his debut film as a screenwriter. He wrote some video called Ticklish back in 2007, but not only has he written challengers, he's working with Luca Guadagnino on his next movie, Queer, an adaptation of the novel by William Burroughs. I've only read his book Junkie, but I will definitely have to have a look at that classic book. I think it's from the 1950s, before I ultimately end up seeing that movie. And actually, I read Naked Lunch, but Naked Lunch was so incomprehensible, I barely remember a word of it. Like, I remember the David Cronenberg movie better, but that's not even an adaptation of Naked Lunch. It's a movie about writing Naked Lunch. In any case, I'm thrilled to see William Burroughs being kind of resurrected by these filmmakers. But Justin Kuritzka's, not only has he written Challengers, and he's also working on Queer, he's also working on City on Fire, which is an adaptation of a novel by Don Winslow. And if you're familiar with Don Winslow, he is an expert at writing riveting police dramas and crime thrillers and that sort of thing. I only read The Force, which I loved, but my older brother who works in publishing has told me that City on Fire kicks some serious ass. But getting back to the flick, I can't tell you what a relief it was to see a movie that was designed for an adult sensibility with actual adult characters having just vicious, adversarial, confrontational scenes together. And that used to be the norm, or I guess it's easy to look back at the past through rose-colored glasses where you selectively say, oh, well, every movie used to be as good as Network by Sidney Lumet, and there were no bad movies, and obviously nothing could be further from the case. But we kind of forget the shitty movies of the past while the good ones shine brighter all the time. But I do have a deep love and reverence for the written word, and I feel like a lot of Hollywood movies overlook the value of the written word, overlook the necessity of the written word, and how your movie just completely falls to pieces unless you have some goddamn good dialogue for your actors to speak. But also, it's not just about having like a cleverly written line, but having, like as I mentioned before, having this incredibly sophisticated storytelling structure. And that could have been invented in the editing room. I would be very curious to see the shooting script versus like the finished footage, and to what degree they decided to kind of cross-cut between the different timelines throughout the movie. Because once again, it could have been one of those situations where the movie was told more or less linearly at one point and they changed it. I really have no idea, but if you are a fan of great writing, if you're a fan of great editing, if you're a fan of great filmmaking, I think you're going to like this movie. I'm not going to oversell it and say that's my favorite movie of 2024 or anything like that, but it's really fucking good. But the question is it going to generate any box office? Because I think we can all agree that Zendaya is a massive celebrity, but the question is she a giant movie star? And for me, the definition of a movie star is very simple. Like, can you open a movie? And by opening a movie, I mean, is a movie going to generate serious business or serious ticket sales based on your star power as opposed to the franchise or the filmmaker? Like if Christopher Nolan were to work with a total nobody, well, you're not going to say, oh, that person's a giant movie star. Look how well that movie opened. It's opening well because of Christopher Nolan. Or if a total nobody appeared in a superhero flick that did really well, like, oh, well, it's because the character is well loved. But if Challengers does well, like Luca Guadagnino definitely has his fans, but it's not like he's got legions of fans lined up around the block waiting for the next Luca Guadagnino experience. I mean, his movie Bones and All, which I really enjoyed, did zero business whatsoever. And it had Timothée Chalamet in it. So it's like, if he can work with Timothée Chalamet, who just had back-to-back massive box office successes. His Wonka movie, as well as Dune Part 2, both did over $600 million. He had two movies out at the same time, which did over $600 million. Timothée Chalamet is a movie star, and obviously he's being helped by those franchises, but Timothée Chalamet is well on his way. And I think Zendaya has all the potential and all the talent in the world to be a big movie star, but people do need to show up. If you are a Zendaya fan, are you planning to go see Challengers? And my big question is whether or not this movie is going to appeal more to women or to men, because my audience was largely women, but there are plenty of guys there. But there are some ingredients in there that will appeal to the fellas. And if you are sensitive to people speaking in a coarse, vulgar way, cover up your ears for the next couple seconds. But there's a scene in this movie where she's seen in profile making out with one of the two leads. I won't say which one. But in profile, her posterior, her ass, was so tight and so perfect. I was like, I can die right now with a big giant smile on my face because I've seen all that life has to offer. So I do think there's stuff in here for red-blooded men, but the movie is also very homoerotic at times, and I think a lot of guys will be like, wait a second, what is, like, my girlfriend talked me into seeing this movie, but what's going on here? I think the advertising for the movie, it implies you're going to get a movie like Wild Things from 1998 with Neve Campbell and Denise Richards, when the reality is you're getting a movie much closer in style and tone to Call Me By Your Name. And if you've not seen Call Me By Your Name, look up the description. But if Call Me By Your Name is not your cup of tea, well, then there are going to be ingredients and Challengers where you're like, I don't know. But anyway, to each their own. I'm going to recommend that people give it a shot. And if you don't like it or if you love it or whatever, like discuss it, like rip it apart, tear it to pieces, put it back together. But like this is a movie that I do think will generate an exciting debate surrounding the movie.
We hope you enjoy it. It's quite an emotional roller coaster of a film. I hope you enjoy talking about it after, arguing about it. Like me and my mom, who's over here, we argue about the ending a lot. Mike, would you like to say anything?
No, you did great. Enjoy the movie, guys.
Because at this point, we've seen Zendaya in Spider-Man movies, we've seen her in Euphoria, we've seen her in the Dune movies, but this feels like a very clear and deliberate shift in strategy for her overall career. What it reminded me of was Emma Stone choosing to work with Yorgos Lanthimos on 2 occasions with The Favorite and Poor Things. And I don't know if Zendaya's got the same level of acting ability as Emma Stone. I feel like she's a little earlier in her career, and much still remains to be seen when it comes to Zendaya. But for me, it's a relief to see that she's done with all that stupid high school bullshit with playing younger characters. She's ready to play adults in complex, sophisticated dramas. Whether or not this gamble will pay off, it's way too early to say, but I applaud her for going after this kind of material with this kind of director at the helm. And as far as her co-stars go, I feel like I've neglected them a little bit in just praising the overall movie as well as Zendaya, but these 2 actors, Mike Feist and Josh O'Connor, they're awesome. I will definitely be looking forward to seeing them in more movies going forward. I won't say which one, but one of them is so proud of being such a son of a bitch and such a scumbag in so many ways, where it's just, he doesn't try to hide his true nature at all. What he really wants to do is just play great fucking tennis and make a lot of money and do well, etc. and so forth. But I just love seeing a character where they're not trying to pretend to be a good person all the time. I'm so sick of celebrities or filmmakers or actors or just Hollywood in general trying to pretend like they're nice people. Like, we all know that people are sick and twisted down to the core of their souls on the whole. let characters just be honest about, their desires and their goals and ambitions. So yeah, both actors, they both get very high marks from me, and I hope that they'll get some good offers and some good work as a result of their appearance or as a result of their work in this flick. But I think that's all I can say without divulging some spoilers. So I hope I've put this movie on some people's radar. I hope I've excited some people's curiosity. Watch the trailer. If the trailer grabs you, definitely check it out. I can't guarantee that everybody's going to like it. I don't even know if my dad's going to like it. I think my dad would probably like just more of a straightforward tennis movie, but he's the tennis fan. I'm the movie fan. If you like movies, you're going to like challengers. If you really like tennis, well, we'll have to just wait and see how people respond in a few days' time. But thank you so much for watching this video. I greatly appreciate it. Please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell, and let me know what you think down in the comments below. But thanks again for watching. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.